So thank you all for joining us. I'm Deanna Palm with the Washington County Chamber of Commerce, and you are part of Eavesdrop. And Eavesdrop is a great program brought to you by the Small Business Entrepreneurial Council, the Washington County Chamber. This is an opportunity for us to have a conversation with a small business owner and for our guests to eavesdrop and take notes. And then at the end of our program, we're going to turn it over to you to ask your questions. And I want to thank our sponsor, Jake Mead with Mead Agency and Associates. Jake, are you with us today?
I am so sorry for being just a few minutes late. Welcome, everyone. I am Jake Mead, the owner of Mead Agency and Associates. Life is better when you're protected under our roof, because when you're protected with our agency, you'll be free to pursue and enjoy the dreams you've worked so hard to achieve. You can contact my award-winning team today at ensuringyourdreams.com.
Thank you so much, Jake. We really appreciate your support and your diamond level leading investment in the Washington County Chamber. So Jelana, thank you so much. Jelana Canfield, who is the owner of Jelana's Bake Shop, is joining us here today. And her and I are going to have a little conversation about what got her to where she's at today, the path she took, and any advice you'd like to give. So Jelana, welcome, and thanks so much for being with us today.
Thank you for having me, Deanna, and the whole chambers.
So just wanted to give, for those folks that don't know you and don't know sort of what brought you to this point in your career, talk a little bit about your background and what got you interested in business ownership, but again, a sort of a retail environment and a bake shop.
Well, most of my academic background was not planned to own a bakery. I think a lot of us who were in school in the 90s probably had to shift gears, or everyone these days. But I went to school and trained as an actor and a dancer for most of my life. Played some sports, graduated with a double major in theater and sociology. Actually, one of the few artists that did go right into professional work. And for extra money, I worked in restaurants. I always baked, enjoyed that time with my mom. In the beginning, I really didn't. I was that kid who wanted an easy bake oven, and she's like, here's your real oven to help me. It didn't look as fun as it did on TV, but as I got older, I really enjoyed it, especially when I would come home from the holidays. After I graduated, did professional and some more academic work, traveling. And then during the 2007 writer's strike, all my work stopped. I had just gotten my union card. So I went all in, just working in restaurants. My husband got a job transfer to Maui. And we moved out there. And what I liked about Maui is there was a sense of just more professionalism working in food and beverage. And so I started taking it, instead of seeing it as like a side hustle, I started taking it really seriously. And still, taught dance classes on the side, and still got my artsy thing going. But what I loved is I met other servers, chefs, managers that had families, lived regular lives, where I felt like in LA and New York, it was all about, oh, well, I only do this to get to something else.
This is Henry.
So I moved, so there it made me start thinking of taking it to a more professional level. Moved here after an injury in Maui, had started working for Iron Chef Morimoto as an event manager. And what was great about that position, you have to be hands-on in every department, because the events department is its own like sub baby restaurant. So I had to learn how to handle financial reports, working with the executive chef team, the pastry department, and I was probably the only manager they ever saw take stages working in the pastry department. Outside of my 60 hours I had to work there anyways, but I just loved it. And taking kind of that love I built with my mom to a professional level was a lot of fun. We moved here. I worked at Huber's, Elephant Delicatessen, and the daily cafe, but then, and I was working for the school district as well. But then the pandemic hit, I got laid off from the school district because I was one of the newest hires. The daily cafe closed down. So I had already had a home license just to have, so I could like, kind of sell cakes here and there, write off, family cakes. And since I was already licensed, we took my severance check and built an online bakery. We treated it like a real business. And from my experience, I promoted it that way. I gave it real work hours. My husband and I set our own schedules. So even if we didn't have orders, we treated it like a real business. And I felt like that really helped us stand out from other home businesses during the pandemic. We also offered shipping and individual wrapping. That was a huge change from where we were at. It created a sense of, there we are. It really made us stand out. Corporations started coming really quickly to us because they could send things to their employees. And I'm going to stop because I was going to lead into the next question more, but I will wait.
Jelana, thank you so much. There's so much to unpack there. So first of all, I just want to start out with the easy bake oven thing.
Yes.
Had to have one myself. And when I got it, I remember I'm like, a light bulb, that's not going to cook anything. A light bulb. Chocolate cake,
right?
Chocolate cake from a light bulb. Who'd have thought, right?
Right.
No, it's slightly doughy. I'll just say that.
My cousin got one, so I literally was at her. I tried to go over my aunt's as much as I could to play with hers. Right. My mom refused to buy anything for like $20. Back then, I guess it's like $60 for a light bulb. So I had to live off my cousin.
I love it. I love it. And also the background of being in theater and an actress and union card. So that was, now your own bake shop. What do those two things have in common? And what do you think your background in theater and acting has done for your business? Do you see yourself using some of those assets as you run your business?
Yes, a lot. One, if you are a working artist, you're literally your own business. You have to market yourself with headshots. You have to network, going to just different networking events. You have to take classes. So you're always training at the same time, going to auditions, being professional on time, meeting all the requirements, and then some. I always tell people in your own accounting, you are literally file taxes very similar because you're self-employed. And so a lot of that was like it's nice where you pick your own hours, but if you're not pursuing your work, whether you're a small business or an artist every day, you can potentially miss opportunities, but you also have to find that work-life balance.
Right. And I think that, the idea of being, an actress, you're hustling, right? You're out there looking for the next job. And we all know that small businesses, small business owners are the same thing, right? They finish one job, they've got 2 or 3 in the pipeline, they're following up. So it's constantly, making sure that you've got the next, 2, 3 jobs lined up. And that's a lot of work.
It is. It really is. Being a working artist and especially a food business owner is not as glamorous as it can look. It's a lot of work just to get to that point. So I use actually a lot being more comfortable speaking with people, in front of people, using those skills. I sometimes catch myself not pronunciating like I used to when I performed. So I try to use some of those techniques too before speaking.
Absolutely. So you talked about the fact that you started out as a sort of a home-based business, right?
Yes.
But a serious one. This wasn't just something to, you know, get through the day, but this was a serious home-based business. And then you started down the pathway and decided bricks and mortar. So talk a bit about that journey, because I think there's a lot of home-based businesses that wonder when's that sort of, when do you take the leap, right? How do you know when it's right? So how do you go through that? How did you go through that process and really contemplate and know that the time was right?
Well, three things I really focused on. One of the biggest was my background in food and beverage. When did I start noticing restaurants I worked for or other bakeries or any kind of food institutions? When did I notice whatever upscaling was at the right time? And that worked. I worked for places with great food, great atmosphere that didn't make it. And I worked for places that, not that any of them were bad. It was just some weren't on the same scale, but still made it. So I started remembering those three factors, like, when is it time? Are you close to a location? Do you feel like you're in a position where you can be at your business at most days? And do you already have a small team that you can trust and build from there? One thing previous restaurant owners always said to me, or GMs, you can't buy trust. You can't train trust and honesty. So, and of course you want certain people to have experience in certain fields, but if you have to weigh out the two options, you know, the trust and honesty is what you want to focus on. So once I was like, okay, are we in a position where there's locations around us, places we can get to quickly? Do we already have a team? So we had already hired a contract baker in the house. So before we really started pursuing, she was already with us for about 9 months. So that added my husband, Chef Jessica, and myself. And so we had a team. Next thing was, how's my revenue out of the house? I told myself, once I start seeing, you know, 5,000 or more out of the house with revenue, then we could start exploring options. Do I have a certain amount ready to invest for myself that we've been able to put aside? And the other big thing was, I started having to turn down orders, not because we couldn't do it as a team, we didn't have storage space. So once I knew we had the clientele and the demand for a large amount of orders on a regular, we had a team that we can trust, and revenue, we were hitting markers for financial markers. That kind of ties in with a customer base. And then the biggest is, I felt like I was mentally at a place where I could start building a larger space for production. We were also getting requests for things that just only would work in retail as well, for walk-in. I made connections like through Washington County Chambers, other groups, and felt like we had that network base to scale up. So those were all the factors that came into play. And then also I had a relationship with, I thought I had a strong enough relationship with my bank to start with them, but I was denied. But then I had a relationship with MISO, Micro Enterprise Services of Oregon. And I had already been a client of theirs for almost a year in their Anchor program, business series program. I had already done their grant matching program, had done another program where you save and it helps you build your credit. So they were even saying, we think you're ready, especially with your experience. So I worked with a loan counselor and we started the process of getting the loan. And once I was approved by their board and the SBA, I felt really ready on
Excellent. So talk a little bit about your recipes, because your stuff's really, really, really good and very unique. So talk
Thank
a little
you.
bit about the variety that you have as well, where you're sort of accommodating everyone's dietary restrictions, that they can still enjoy something really, really outstanding.
My approach to recipe development and our style is I wanted to take classic American pastries, but work on enhancing their flavor profile with cutting the amount of sugar. I'm kind of also a little bit of a food nerd. Dr. Jessica Harris I'm a big fan of her work. A Seat at the Table really changed my life, her book, and it talks about how a lot of our culinary dishes didn't start off with so much sugar, so much preservatives. A lot of it is rooted, of course, in all the different cultures that have made up the US. And I wanted to get back to that. I wanted to start with my own family recipes. That's why we started with cinnamon rolls. But then on the business side, cakes is the #1 selling confection in the US. So I love making cakes too. But I felt like those were the two approach, kind of an emotional connection, but a lot of people love cinnamon rolls, but I also wanted to change it. My grandmother's recipe was very traditional. There's a lot of sugar in the frosting. So it took me a while to first I added cream cheese to kind of break up that monotony of just sugar and butter with a texture profile. My sister brought home some apple butter she got from a sample table, and she's like, maybe you can use this somehow. I first put it in the cinnamon roll. It distorted the heavy water content, distorted the dough. And then I was like, well, let me try in the frosting. And that was a big game changer. Not only did I had already cut probably about 1/4 of what my grandmother's amount of sugar, I cut probably another 1/3. So I'm using over less than half than what her recipe was, which is a very standard American cinnamon roll frosting recipe. And it gives flavor complexity from the apples. It's a connection to where we're living. I'll be honest, I'm not buying apple butter made from the Northwest. I wish I could, and not have my cinnamon roll be $10, but we'll get into, I do use local produce for other aspects, but anyways, it spoke to the region I was baking in. It spoke to a way to bring complexity to my recipe, and it cut sugar. So it's kind of this win-win. I added some other spices in the actual filling. Cinnamon, of course, is the dominant because it is a cinnamon roll, but I added a few other things that enhance bringing out the cinnamon, I believe. So I do that for a lot of the dishes. Just like whether it's the chocolate chip cookies or the blondies or the butter or brownies or even savory aspects like scones, or biscuits. I try to keep it where people will go, oh my God, this reminds me of like my grandmother's, but I want to add some aspects where you feel like your grandma went to culinary school and she came back and like, still kept her stuff true, but the techniques I've learned over the years to make things more consistent. And also I had to think from an operations perspective. A lot of our cookie doughs have a very similar structure. Usually when you get a cookie, let's say a cookie cookbook, a lot of them are different structures. Like you need butter for this, oil for this, very different amounts. I knew to help with operations, keeping payroll low, streamlining large orders, there had to be some kind of consistency. I won't bore you with kind of the chef details, but there is kind of a base to most of our cookie doughs or biscuits or the scones, and then we work from there. Oh, and the different dietary preferences that came out of family members that were vegan and would go all around town because, oh, this is good over here, this is good over here to be vegan. And finally I was like, shouldn't it just be good, like whether it's vegan, gluten-free or not? And I think that's what helps. I'm not gluten-free, I'm not vegan, I'm not gluten-free and vegan, I'm not non-glycemic. I only would sell things I would sit down and eat a dozen of. Not that I do, but you know what I mean? And that's why we get a lot of people who are like, oh, I went to, my wife's birthday cake was gluten-free. And of course she loved it, but I actually loved it too. Or, and that was my goal. I want a place where you can go for the whole family, whole group of co-workers, circle of friends, everyone can get something. But if you have a pinch off of somebody else's, you're still going to like it.
So I don't know about anybody else, but I'm assuming our eavesdroppers are as hungry as I am now. And the other thing is, you've heard it here now, folks. Jelana's cinnamon rolls, good for you. They're good for you, which I love. It's so good to know that. And I really appreciate you taking us, through that process of thinking about how you not only do a recipe for one cake, but how you would do the same sort of thing and how you scale that, how you think about the fact of the customer experience, right? So if I'm vegan or gluten-free, I need to know that, but my partner that's also going to share that with me doesn't need to know that, right? Because they feel like, oh, well, now I'm being cheated, right? And you've shown people that they don't have to feel like that, right?
Right.
So that's excellent. So let's go back to that bricks and mortar. So you found a location.
Yes.
And then what?
So the location was very important. It had to be within a 15-minute drive from our house, and that was pushing it. Again, I remembered all the things that worked. I felt like we're consistently working for the other businesses I worked for. And it had infrastructure that would lower my construction costs. So it had a walk-in, it had a grease trap. I wanted it to be another food business, which it was. It used to be a Domino's. And it was funny, there's another location that was going to be a little bit more, but it looked a lot cleaner, but it didn't have the walk-in, didn't have the grease trap. There's a little bit more foot traffic, but I had to weigh the options by also what I was offered for my loan. And so for me, I knew having that infrastructure was very important. So I feel like we're at a good location too, where not only are we only 10 minutes away, and that's with traffic from the location. There was a hole in a custom bakery. I wasn't too close to any other bakeries. Of course, our base is Hillsborough still. The house is still considered our office. So as Mayor Calloway likes to say, home base is still in Hillsborough, but we did have to go to Aloha. It seemed like everything I was looking for, and this is at the time, I'm sure there's more spaces now. I was going to be too close to either a space that didn't have a lot of foot traffic, or too close to a competitor, and which would only hurt me because one of the competitors actually sells our products. And I just knew I wanted to be a place where people were kind of missing out on that home baking experience as well, or not home baking, but non-grocery store bakery. So I felt like 185th and Farmington was ideal. Our biggest competitor is Safeway, and we're in a different price bracket. We offer different products, and I'm totally comfortable when people say, it's a little, in fact, now that Basics is here, the new grocery store, I'll actually try to send them there first if they can't. So but a big thing is a lot of our customers are so we have been needing this. What else? So we knew it was a good location. It was more beat up than any of the other places I looked at, but once I had a contractor look at it, he's like, oh, this is pretty much superficial. Besides, putting in definitely some more power. A lot of your infrastructure is already here. Also, what we really loved, it was the only space that had load bearing walls to have a room for just gluten-free production. That was very important for me. In the house, I would start so early, even when I really didn't need to, because I would do gluten-free production first, do a wipe down, then into vegan, then into traditional. And now that I have a space where everything can be done at once, it really saves on time and labor. And gluten-free, I feel like we can offer even a more safe. I always tell people, if you're really deadly, of course, only go somewhere that's gluten-free. But we get a lot of celiacs that do trust us because there's a separate space. We wrap it in plastic when we bring it to the counter, which is in the wheat space. And for some people who don't even feel comfortable coming in, we'll take your order at your car.
Wow, that's great customer service. And it also shows that you understand people's restrictions and dietary concerns and issues. So help me understand, Jelana, you home-based business to bricks and mortar. What's that time frame in terms of all those contemplations that you went through and studying foot traffic and all of that?
The loan was approved, like I want to say January 30th, 2022. So let's just say February. It took us from February to June to sign a lease. And then June to November 12th to open doors. I would say June to late October to get furniture, equipment moved in. And then another 2 weeks. We did have some construction issues. I would say for anyone that's making the transition, that's the biggest thing I would probably have done differently. Probably the only big thing I would have done differently. I went by word of mouth, and it's not that that person didn't have a great experience. And they were in food, but what I should have done is looked into the same type of food. I was recommended by a food company that doesn't have heating elements to their meals. And also next time I'll go through, even if it costs more, like a union. I'm blanking, is it
Like a labor union kind of?
Yes, there is one. It's for it's predominantly for contractors of color and women. Titonian, if you're listening, the Black Business Association of Oregon, they sponsors them.
It's not Awami.
Are you Awami? Are you referring, you said contractors?
Yes.
Awami, Oregon Association of Minority Entrepreneurs?
Yes. And
Okay.
there's another one that starts with an N. So Awami is yes, but there's another one I'm blanking on. It's okay. I would definitely go through an agency that can help you make sure they've already been vetted. Yes, NAMC. Thank you. Thank you. Because it's not like someone's giving you bad advice. Someone can have a great experience with a contractor. I'm sure anyone who's dealt with even just getting your bathroom or kitchen remodeled, you had a great experience, you sent them to a friend, and then the friend's like, who did you send me? Every job is different. However, I find when you're already vetted through a union group, there's more aspects that have to be checked off that are more consistent. And I think if I had worked with one of those two union groups, they would have made sure I've had a contractor that dealt with like double ovens, that dealt with having to do power for a food production business versus, and that had ample experience with the space I was using. And then just, they have to, they could lose out on having a bad experience with a customer or a client more than maybe someone word of mouth. Like they started off great, but we found out at the end, they didn't even file our building permit. And if we had put in our Washington County, I don't know if I should brag about this, but they were amazing. They expedited. Once they saw that I was missing a lot of paperwork that the contractor told me was done and nothing should have been started without that paperwork, they came in, they really did a really good overhaul and looking at everything, because they said, we could have easily said, we have to revoke your electrical your plumbing permit, your electrical permit, your HVAC permit, because there wasn't an initial building permit ever filed. The contractor did get sick, which I understand, that's life. I'm not mad about that. That's, out of his control, but I was a little disappointed that the person he put in charge was taking people off my job to go to other jobs, even though they were saying they're at my job. And that whole missing out on the paperwork. Luckily, I didn't put any load-bearing walls because they said they would have had to knock those out and start from scratch.
Jelana, Heart of Gold, a little disappointed that you didn't have a building permit after you were ready to open your doors.
Yep. And luckily,
Bless you.
So,
I mean,
it was a
whoa.
very scary 2 weeks. And it delayed opening. We were also given a really low estimate. That's another thing about going through a union or some kind of vetting agency. They'll make sure your contractor has a history of giving out really proper estimates. There's always things you can find, but because we took over as contractors, we realized he underestimated by not by 10 or 15,000, but by 50,000. So it ate up a lot of my loan that was supposed to be going towards equipment and startup fees. Luckily, I quickly got a grant through the Black Business Association of Oregon and DoorDash. They had an accelerator program, some of my own funds, and then MISO gave me a little bit more too. So to compensate for that $50,000. But what's nice is I did learn how to build your own bakery. I bought probably, I want to say 80% of our own supplies. Canez, Home Depot. I learned what goes where, how to apply FRP.
Wow.
And we took over, and the crew were so loyal to us. They were taking instruction from us. They stayed on the job. They're like, no, he made an agreement with you. So the person he put in charge while he was sick, the GC's kind of second command, he's like, no, I'm sorry about the times I did take him off your job. I was just trying to juggle a lot. This is my first time running his business, and they finished it out. And
well, that's awesome. And I thank you, number one, for sharing that, because I think oftentimes, you think I've got a home-based business, I want to move it to a bricks and mortar, you think about the business side of it, and then all of a sudden, oh, I'm a contractor. And you're managing those kinds of relationships that you might not have ever, dealt with. And, thinking to say, gosh, I'd like to get a copy of that building permit and what that entails. I mean, you've hired somebody to manage that, but what can go wrong, is what you experienced. And again, a shout out to Washington County for their grace in helping guide you through that process and not making that a problem for you. So now you said what date was your grand opening again?
We opened the doors on November 12th. The grand opening with the chambers and the community was November 18th, a week later.
So, you've been around now for 8 months, 9 months, not doing my math real well. So how's the bakery going?
We had some staffing issues that had a really kind of trickle effect. I had an employee the new term is you just ghosted us, just left. But I'm not putting that out there like it was on her as a business owner. I've learned a lot. So I realized how, and another bakery owner who's a mentor, she warned me about this from the get-go. Be ready, someone will leave and they will more than likely not tell you. I promise you. And I think because it didn't happen until 4 months in, I was like, oh, I've really lucked out on the staff. And I have. Life happens. I kind of forgot that advice. And then when I got on the hustle to replace that person, I wasn't getting the feedback I was getting. And then it was making the rest of the team do overtime. And then I was starting to lose payroll revenue. from paying the overtime, and then they were doing things really someone being paid at a different rate. So my two highest paid chefs are now doing counter work, kind of I don't want to use the word like entry level production work. My husband and I were coming in, but then I was getting behind on marketing. Then I started pulling from marketing budget to keep this train going, payroll, and it was a snowball that started really quickly. We had some of our own personal issues that slowed us down. Some of you already know my mom passed, and I just when I kind of got back on my feet from that, I really didn't even take hardly any days off from that. But it was a distraction where I couldn't, and not sleeping well. I felt like I wasn't making great decisions. I oddly had to let my accountant go because I couldn't afford to pay them anymore. And that's like kind of cutting off your leg while you're training for a marathon. But I'm like, well, I'm still not fully staffed. So it was a very hard decision to make, especially when orders are rolling in. So then I thought, okay, I will make up, instead of me doing the bookkeeping, sending it to accountant, I'll just get a really good bookkeeper. And then that didn't happen. Someone came, then they had to go. And so I'll be honest right now, orders are great, but it's pretty draining, and I am losing funds really quick, trying to look for investors, trying to get maybe another loan from a bank now that I'm more established. Maybe they'll say yes this time. I'm asking for less funds. So I have a meeting tomorrow at Umpqua for that. So it's we are also in a car accident, but we're fine. And it was just, I didn't even bring that up. I'm just saying, like, there's just things that happen, and when you're a small business owner, I knew that's one thing about working in food. I watched all my bosses go through crazy things and still keep their business going. And I even planned for those things. I planned for things like AC maybe going out, an HVAC issue, or my, walk-in going out, which it did. And I was always on it. Had a reservoir for things like that. I was ready for things like that. I wasn't ready for things like my mom, or the accident. So I always say, just kind of be ready for anything, and then start foreseeing these issues. I've already foresaw some of these, how to fix them. I'm just trying to get the wheels in place to get them fixed. So,
Jelana, thank you so much for your authenticity and your realness of the story. And really, I mean, oftentimes I think, we talk to folks and they're like, everything's going great, right? Everything's going great. And that's what they're putting out there. And, maybe underneath the wheels are falling off and they're feeling like, but I can't say anything. I gotta keep, but you bring a reality to what I would bet every single one of our eavesdroppers today has an experience that can relate to what you said, and can relate to, what impact labor shortages had. And yes, we've all had people that, came in, you got them all settled, you got them, onboarded, and, they didn't come back from lunch, for heaven's sakes, right? And it's like, what? And you're like, what do I do now? And in a bake shop, I mean, you've got a product, right, that you've got to deliver. And so, the challenges and that you have to go through, and the shuffling of priorities, right? I don't think anybody would ever be ready and isn't ready for their mom to pass. And so, but, trying to think about, how do I keep my business afloat while still being a human being, and struggling with the loss, right? When was the car accident?
April, I think.
Oh
So
goodness.
yeah. And I bring these things up not for like, it's just I think too, in food, we're kind of this unique industry where there is a lot of honesty rolling around. Everywhere I worked, you kind of knew what was going on in your boss's life. I don't know why. Maybe it's because you're making something that literally brings life to the world. I always say there's a huge, please excuse my French, one of the chefs I worked under, he's like, there's a lot of stress in food for something that's just going to be future. I'll
We
just
got
be the
you.
way he said it, future shit. And he's like, you're going to get a lot of shit for something. All it's going to do is give you energy, then become shit. And he's like, I can't explain it, but it's the way the industry always has been. In fact, I love that my bakery, there's no yelling, there's no, a lot of TV shows are very dramatic, but a lot of them, it's not like that all the time, but a lot of them are pretty on the nose. It can get very intense. And I knew that. And there's something about that intensity where after you're done with service, you just kind of spill your guts to people you only work with for, maybe if you're a server, 4 to 6 hours a day. If you're back of the house for 12 hours a day, you're just with these people in intense situations. So there is kind of a lot of transparency, I feel like, in food and beverage already. But there's a power too in knowing that you're providing nourishment. But there is a catch-22. It's also one of the tightest margin industries in the world, and definitely in our country. A lot of places won't invest in food because of that. There's just so many moving parts to creating food margins. And that's why I worked in it so long. I always said I was never going to own a food business. But again, COVID and but I said, if we're going to do this, I'm going to do the things I think worked and look out for the things that didn't work. That was grateful to starting with an online business. I had the customer base. I think some of the places I worked that didn't stay open is because they were great. Every aspect was being nailed. It just didn't have time and the revenue to build that customer base with such thin margins. That's also the reason why when I started online, I only started with a few things. I always say with food, you should either 3 things. You either want 3 different items in one version or 1 item in 3 different versions. And you kind of build from there.
Jelana,
That's
that's great.
especially if you're out of your house.
That's great advice. And I think that, it is very unique, the food business. I remember how many months ago was it? And we were all talking about the price of eggs, right? And I'm like, yeah, that makes it hard for me to have my little egg in the morning. For someone that owns a bake shop, that can turn your business plan upside down, right? Trying to figure out, right? Exactly. And so, yeah, I mean, it's just all of those different factors that go into it. And it's a juggling act, right? So it is time now for us to turn it over to our eavesdroppers to see whether they've got any questions for you. So anybody have any
Just
questions?
super quick to help with
Yeah,
questions.
please.
I did just wrap up the PSU capstone program, and it really helped us, because another thing about having a business, you got to be open to changes and adapting around all of these. Like when you have an issue, how can I adapt? And we are now starting to focus more on catering, of course, our walk-in, but catering. So Professor Ozier is here, so I just wanted to make sure I did a shout out to her too.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And that is a program that we are, the Washington County Chamber collaborates with PSU. And every semester we have an opportunity for these businesses to go through this process with students that are doing their capstone project. It's a great program. And thank you for that testimonial. Any questions for Jelana? Comments?
I have one.
Jake,
Jelana, we talked one time about that carrot cake was one of my grandmother's favorite recipes and favorite things. So at her 1-year death anniversary, I got it for my grandfather in honor of my grandma. And you mentioned, oh, I've got 3 other recipes in the pipeline, and I'm just curious. I'm sure all of them are delicious, but how do you decide what is going to be the Jelana Bake Shop's carrot cake recipe that you stick with? I know because you got, in that instance, 4 to pick from.
So one is operations and cost. So it's not the first thing. Of course, flavor is the first. Of course, I'm like, okay, how do I envision this to have a nice balance? The sweetness, the main ingredient, carrot, the acidity levels, the texture, but also am I overlapping some ingredients I already use? So I'm not wasting more product or going out and causing more time for shelf space or time for ordering and adding to my inventory cost of goods cost. And then how easy is it to make for my team, keeping payroll at a certain level, but still not sacrificing taste and quality. And then of course at the end it's beta tested with customers. So it's kind of like this kind of balancing act. Oh, and storage. So it's kind of these 5 elements. The ingredients, taste, the actual product itself, how it comes across, how much labor, how much shelf ingredients does it use, and of course the customers. So some things will be a special, some say, like I use the vegan gluten-free as the one we use in the case, even in the traditional case. Most people don't know that it's naturally vegan and gluten-free. There's no allergens, so I don't have to like list it. And I would say it's our top 3rd pastry for traditionalists, even more than gluten-free and vegan people. So I knew it was a good sell for across the board dietary preferences, is why I went with that one. However, my personal favorite is probably our just traditional carrot cake. It has very classic, more classic texture. But the one that kind of we use for the case has a more rustic feel too. So people also feel like they're eating something more healthy because it's darker and has a more bread texture appearance. But actually they're all still versions of cake.
Well, and if you're ever in need of a taste tester, I'm just going to raise my hand, right? Oh, Jake's with me, right? Any other questions from our eavesdroppers? No questions. Jelana, thank you.
Tyler had the question.
Oh, sorry, Tyler.
No, that's okay. I just wanted to say, actually, it's more of a statement than a question, but Jelana, I've just loved hearing your story. I didn't realize you have a theater background, as I do as well. We theater people. Yes. I think that gives us a leg up in business and dealing with people and having to come up with answers on the spot and being creative. I think that will serve you well. I think that you're in it right now. Right at the beginning, it's just like you're carrying everything, but you're a make it work type of person. And I can see that in your character. And that's going to make you successful. I think businesses that fail are the ones that say, oh, I'm going to open a business because I hear there's lots of money in it. Or oh, I have a credit card now with a business line of credit. That means it's just free money, And those are the businesses that fail. But I feel like you have all of the stick-to-itiveness that will make you succeed. And I'm just so excited to see where you're going to go, because it's really like I feel like I'm hearing my story over just 16 years ago. And here we are 16 years in with 100 employees. Never, ever would I have ever thought I'd be here. But I just see this is exactly your path too. We're going to check in with you in 16 years and you're going to have an empire.
Thank you, Tyler. Thank you.
I'm so inspired by you, friend.
Thank you. I am as well as you.
16 years, Tyler. Wow, that's amazing. And what a great
amazing.
testament. And thank you, Tyler, for sharing that, because I do think oftentimes entrepreneurs, kind of get in their own headspace and they feel like this is just me, right? Nobody else has ever experienced this. And wow, to have that shared experience and say, you're exactly where you're supposed to be, right? This is normal. This is not, not working. This is exactly getting to that kingdom, like you said, right? So awesome. Any final questions from anybody? I don't want to miss anybody.
I just kind of want to echo what Tyler said and just thank Jelana for her candid testimony today, because I think we've all had these struggles, and especially with the impending recession, we see clients leaving us, and that fear of, am I going to be able to pay my monthly expenses? So I appreciate also that vulnerability and sharing that. It makes the rest of us feel better. Thank you.
Thank you, Christy.
All right, folks, thank you. And Jelana, thank you again, for being so open, so straightforward, and sharing experiences that will help other entrepreneurs. It's that generosity of heart that we so appreciate. Also want to again thank our sponsor, Mead Agency and Associates, Jake Mead. Thank you so much. I really truly appreciate it. And we're looking forward to having you back here again with our Small Business Solutions series in July. And we're going to be looking at our small business survey results. So be sure to put that on your calendar, and we will see you then. Please have a great rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, so much.
Thanks, Jelana.